heard earlier that 37% of new workers entering construction are women, which is an amazing statistic. But there's always more we can do as an industry. The Interior Solutions brand within Saint-Gobain Group, British Gypsum and Isover share more than a common business background. They're part of the Together as One network, which is committed to championing and advancing diversity, equality, inclusion and belonging right across the construction industry. And to explore what this means in practice, we've been talking to some of the people involved.
I started at Saint-Gobain Interior Solutions around 7 months ago as the Sector Marketing Communications Manager for the Retrofit and Refurbishment sector. I wanted a different kind of opportunity in a large global business. It's not something I've really done before, and I was really interested in the purpose of Saint-Gobain in that they want to make the world a better home that aligns with my personal values, and I saw a lot of correlation with the job role. In terms of my own skill set and an opportunity to add real value. When I had the interview for this role, I specifically asked questions around diversity, equity, inclusion and belonging, because it is something that's really important to me. Throughout my career, I've been involved in various initiatives at different size companies to set up working groups and strategy. So in my interview for this role, I asked about that and whether there was an opportunity to get involved, and there was. And so since I've started, I've been very involved in the Together as One group.
Being a woman in an engineering background, I was kind of one of the diverse people, but not the only diverse group, but I was quite passionate about that side of it. I was interested in helping people, be comfortable and have the right things in place within the business, so just share the experience really. SGIS came up with having some D&I ambassadors. I was approached to join that group, and then the Together as One kind of came around, so I was then approached to kind of go on the steering committee for that.
Together as One is our working group at SGIS for diversity, equity, inclusion and belonging, and Together as One is across all of Saint-Gobain UK and Ireland, so there is a steering group that works across all of the brands within that part of the business, and then each brand has their own working group.
Everything became Together as One, so we kind of named we voted on it and became the Together as One group, because it's all about inclusion really, and all of it is just making people feel welcome in business. We're trying to get a lot of workshops together to get everyone else involved and having those just provoking conversations really.
We're in the early stages, so we've just literally had a meeting around setting up for the rest of the year and looking into next year, the activities we want to go forward with. It's an opportunity for everybody across SGIS to take part in an inclusion workshop.
So each brand will have its own challenges with location or the type of business they're in. It's really just about getting the message out there that we are interested, that this is something that's important for us to improve on.
I think it's important when we talk about this topic that we refer to it as DEIB, standing for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion and Belonging. I think historically it's been called EDI, and that E is often referred to as equality, but there's a huge difference between equality and equity, and I think that's a really important nuance. The difference being that having an equitable workplace means that everybody is given the right opportunities catered to where they're starting from. And there's a really powerful image that's been shared a lot to sort of explain the difference between equity and equality, that shows if you had a race and there's some children behind a fence trying to look over the fence to see that race, but they've all got different circumstances, and maybe one's in a wheelchair, for example. If you give them a box to step up on so they can all see, it's not going to have the same output for their own individual circumstances. So that's really the difference between equity. It's catering that adjustment to the needs of the person.
We had the opportunity within our Purpose Day, Saint-Gobain Purpose Day, to run an All That We Share activity, and that we captured probably about 800 people across SGIS. So All That We Share was like, what have we all got in common? There was a set of 25 questions, and people you just look around the room and think, actually, I didn't know we had that in common, and it's just really getting some conversations and people to just go out of the room thinking slightly differently.
We have looked at a number of workshops. One of those was the Privilege Walk, which we did together as a group. That exercise is a really interesting exercise to do with a group of colleagues. So you essentially line up and one person is the facilitator. They have a list of statements which you either step forward or step back to, depending on the statement. For example, one of the statements in the session we did was step forward if one of your parents has gone to university. So it's questions like that about your lived experience. One that was really relevant to me, that I was the only one that stepped back for, was step forwards if you can go anywhere in the country and get the hair products and skin products that you need. And that surprised people in the room, and they are people that are engaged with inclusion, diversity, equity, belonging. So you can imagine how powerful it will be with the rest of the organisation, with those that maybe aren't as engaged in the topic, because if that can surprise them, then it will certainly surprise others with the different statements that are discussed within that exercise.
When I first started, it was kind of I would get mistaken for somebody that was in an administration role. So I would walk into a meeting and people would be assuming that I was the one making the coffee and taking the minutes, but actually I was probably chairing the meeting at the time. There weren't many engineers in, working in manufacturing who were female. So it's just really about, not shouting or anything and just letting people know gently that that's probably not very appropriate. Don't tend to get that anymore. There's another bit about if you set diversity targets, then if you are in a minority, you might think you're a tick box, and that's really not how we want to make people feel. So, I only got my job because I'm a woman. Maybe I've had that question posed to me before. It's not true. I got my job because I was the best person for it. But people might ask that question. So, it's getting better for people in minorities to come forward and be welcomed in, because people's mindset is changing.
Certainly in other workplaces where my race has become an issue, or the fact that I'm the only woman in the room has become an issue, but I'm not just the only woman in the room, I'm the only woman of colour in the room. So it becomes something that sort of compounds, and it's my experience, and it's hard sometimes to get that across to people that aren't affected by those cross points of intersectionality and have challenges in the workplace, because it's not something they necessarily think about. I've become a lot more confident as I've gone through my career in calling it out and challenging and not being afraid to do that. But when I first started my career, I certainly didn't feel that way. It was sort of navigating the world of corporate life is hard enough, and then adding in those elements as well, that was certainly challenging. The way that I addressed that was by finding a mentor that had similar characteristics to me, but was more senior and more experienced, and being able to share best practice examples, personal experiences and ways of dealing with that really helped me. So I definitely encourage mentorship. It's something that I'm doing here as well.
So we're all volunteers. No one's getting paid any extra to do anything. We don't get extra time in our day. We're all doing it because we're passionate and interested in, Saint-Gobain strapline is making the world a better home, and we're trying to make Saint-Gobain a better home for everyone to work in.
It's stories like this that really highlight the great advances and achievements happening every day in construction right across the UK. For now, that's all the time we have for this episode. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time for more insights and inspiration that's helping us all on the way to building better.